Hey there, it's Dr. Karen, and I've been working on something for the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps pediatric therapists to map out their dream careers. And I wanted to share a resource that I've been working on this last week. I know that sometimes when you are a clinician, whether you're an SLP, an OT, a PT, it can feel like you have that, like you're very boxed in as far as your career options. And so what I do is I help people think creatively about the way that they use their clinical skills. So this could be used for navigating some of the more traditional settings and the more obvious options, but also considering some other things that you may not have thought of. So what I wanted to do today is go through it's actually going to be a printable guide. It's not ready yet, but it's coming. But a printable guide that goes through 10 career options for clinicians. I'm actually just going to read off all of them and share what's on the guide so that you can tell what's coming. And the thing is that a lot of times when we don't know an option is available, we don't go after it. So I wanted to just go through 10 career options that are available for pediatric therapists and that will allow them to use their clinical skills and also to use their skills in a way that makes them feel like they are making an impact with their work. And the thing is that we want to think flexibly about what we do, because many times if we just think of one option, we can feel kind of limited and boxed in when it comes to the way that we offer services. What these things can do is expand your career options so that you can create a situation that allows you to provide services in a number of different ways, so you can offer the clients and the people that you serve a bunch of different ways that you can offer support. So I'm just going to go through the 10 options that I have in the guide one at a time and tell you a little bit about each one of them. I'm actually going to be reading off my screen over here because I'm working on this as we speak. So the first option is that you can be a clinician. This is the most obvious thing. This is probably what you might be doing right now, where you're offering direct one-on-one therapy, or maybe you're doing it in a group setting. Sometimes you might be doing classroom-based interventions or some kind of vocational or community-based intervention. But basically, you're a therapist. You're doing therapy. That's the most obvious thing. Now, within this category, there are a bunch of different service delivery models you can use. So you can do one-on-one. You can go into again, like a community setting. So you can pull out or you can push in. So there's a number of different ways you can do that. Many times people who use this option are working in an outpatient facility, a school, or a medical setting. So that's the most obvious thing. So obviously we start with that. The second thing is that you can be a clinical supervisor. So there are a number of different settings where you can use this option. So sometimes if you are working for a school or a medical facility that has a lot of therapists, eventually they need someone to move up and supervise the other clinicians. This is also something that is often hired at university settings where there are pre-service clinicians who are, graduate students trying to finish their graduate degree so they can get their licensure, and you can often be a clinical supervisor in that position as well. Or sometimes people who have a private practice might have a situation where they've hired a bunch of clinicians and they're supervising them. So that's another option as well. So that can either be a self-employed or a hired option. Option number 3 is that you can be a clinical supervisor and an instructor. This is typical for the most obvious setting would be a university. So many times when they need clinicians to supervise the graduate students or people in a clinical setting, sometimes they also need people to teach sections of courses. So they often will take someone who maybe has a master's degree and they are able to supervise clinicians. So they do have a clinical supervisor role as part of their job, but then they also might be able to teach college courses. So that adds some additional things that you can add to your resume, and that can add some variety to your work and the way that you serve. So that's option number 3. So we've got clinician, clinical supervisor, and instructor. The third option I wanted to mention before I move on is that sometimes when you have that clinical supervisor and instructor position, if you're working for a university, a lot of times there are other opportunities to be on committees and do research. So there could be other exciting options that could come with that one as well. Option number 4 is that you could be a coordinator or a department head. This is something that might be in medical settings or school settings. So if you are some kind of a school service personnel, for example, a school psychologist, a social worker, an SLP, or another kind of interventionist, you can go from working directly with students to more of an administrative role where you're supervising. Or sometimes they have hybrid positions where you're doing some teaching or some direct instruction or therapy, and you're also supervising staff. So sometimes in the school district, how this could look is that you could be a special ed coordinator, for example, or I know I'm an SLP and there were some co-ops that I worked for that had a speech department coordinator. So sometimes it can look like that as well. So these positions are often people who might report directly to the other administrators like the directors and the principals, or that work alongside them. Option number 5 is leadership and administrative positions. So obviously the coordinator or department head kind of fits in this category, but the other leadership and administrative positions can involve things. If you're working in a school district, it could be things like special ed directors or curriculum directors, or even, building principals or superintendents. I think the most common option for people who are therapists, because that's typically part of special ed, probably the most obvious option would be something like a special ed director. But I do know people who have done kind of a hybrid curriculum director, special ed director role as well. So there are many times that if you get certified, you can do something that isn't necessarily special ed specific. For example, you could be a building principal if you got that credential, or you can sometimes move into some other leadership role that maybe is unique to certain districts, but you can certainly use your clinical skills that way. Option number 6 is private practice. This is another one that's kind of obvious. If you want to pursue a self-employed option, you can start seeing clients on the side. So there's a number of different ways you can do this. If you're a therapist, then obviously you might be having people bill insurance. If you are a teacher, or if you have some other kind of service that you can offer that isn't necessarily a therapy service, I know some people that offer things like tutoring or parent coaching. And so they're using their clinical skills in that way. So that's kind of one of the more obvious options, is that you can start seeing clients on the side of whatever your traditional job is. So to review, we've got 6 options. I've got clinician, clinical supervisor and instructor combo, coordinator or department head, leadership and administrative positions like directors, and then private practice. And I know that some of these are overlapping a little bit. Option number 7 is consulting. So this option is endless. There are many times that you can take your clinical skills and use them to create consulting packages. And this typically can be a self-employed option, but there could be other ways that you could use this as well. One example that I did is that I used to offer a consulting package where I would help doctoral candidates finish their dissertations. So I was using my clinical skills in that way, as I was using my knowledge of research and that process, as well as writing. And there were many of my clients who were doing topics that were somewhat related to my field, or that were in adjacent fields. So I could give some information on the content and give some feedback in that respect as well. So with consulting, that can really be endless. I know people who use their clinical skills that way to consult and just do parent consults or consults with school districts or other professionals. Or I know people that use their other skill sets that they learned in a clinical setting that aren't necessarily clinical skills to offer consulting packages as well. For example, I know people who offer copywriting services for different companies that are related to education and healthcare, and they're using their knowledge in that respect. Option number 8 is online and in-person education. So this is actually what I do. I offer online education where I have some digital courses and products that I sell in order to help educate other therapists. Specifically, one of the product suites that I offer is in my clinical area of expertise, language and literacy. But there are lots of other options in this category. So that is one great option. And this is something that you can do online. You could offer this in person. You can do in-person seminars, or you can do a hybrid combination of both. I know some people who have a private practice and then they sometimes do trainings online or for school districts. So there's a lot of options in that category as well. Option number 9 is digital or physical products. So I've seen a lot of people do this. They might create lessons or materials or protocols that help other therapists in their discipline to do therapy. I've seen people make products for parents or for teachers or for adjacent disciplines who need help with something that's related to their area of expertise. And then I've even seen people do fun things like swag. So in the digital and physical products, it's kind of in somewhat in the e-commerce category. There's a lot of options there as well. And then finally, corporate positions. So I actually know someone who was a teacher for 14 years and then transitioned to a corporate setting and had a really successful career in that field. So many times you can use your clinical skills because you have, expertise in a certain topic area, or maybe you know about human behavior, or you know how to conduct a meeting, or maybe you have experience with project management and coordinating a number of people, or maybe you have a lot of experience with teaching and learning, which can be applicable to corporate settings. So there are certainly ways that you can use your clinical skills in the corporate settings. This definitely requires some knowledge of interviewing and the setting that you are actually trying to get into. Many times there is you do kind of have to know the right people in order to get your foot in the door there, but it is certainly possible to use your clinical skills or other skills that you've learned in the clinical setting in the corporate arena. So let me go through that one more time. I'll just list them out really quickly. Option number 1, clinician. Option number 2, clinical supervisor. Option number 3, clinical supervisor and instructor. Option number 4, coordinator or department head. Option number 5, leadership and administrative positions. Option number 6, private practice. Option 7, consulting. Option 8, online or in-person education. Option 9, digital or physical products. And option 10, corporate positions. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope it gets the creative juices flowing and gets you excited about some things that are possible. I am going to share something in the comments. This is actually what I do in the School of Clinical Leadership. I help pediatric clinicians map out a career path so that they can create a career that is totally in line with the way that they like to work and that allows them to have autonomy in the way that they serve. And many times it takes a lot of little mini test runs to, number 1, get the experience that you need in order to launch that next stage of your career, and to just figure out what you want to do. Many times, the ideal situation isn't just one thing. A lot of people like to have multiple income streams or like to do a variety of services because they just, they like the variety. They like offering a number of different ways to serve. So if that's you, if you are looking to move on to the next stage of your career or try something on the side to see if it might be something that you want to get into, to add to your current job, or to maybe consider a career transition in the future, then definitely check out the School of Clinical Leadership. The School of Clinical Leadership is a program for pediatric therapists who want to map out the next stage of their career and create a career that allows them to feel fulfilled in their work. So obviously, there's not just one career path for clinicians. The ideal thing for you might be a combination of things. In order to figure that out, we need to have a process for creating those micro experiments that help you explore and that help you to build the experience that you need in the same time. And the great part about that is that a lot of times these activities can, number 1, be done without having to leave your job, and they can also really help serve the clients on your current caseload. So if you are interested, then I'm going to share the link below, and you will be able to check out that program. The program is actually kicking off in October, and we're going to be welcoming our first round of founding members.